Ladies and gentlemen, get ready, because it's time for Dark Winter Nights. True stories from Alaska, the biggest, baddest storytelling show here in Fairbanks. Some say he's the one funding the immigrant caravan just so he can boost the audience size at his events. Others say even Kanye West thinks some of his theories on the universe are a little bizarre. Here's your host, Rob Prince.
Fairbanks! I had no business being on that thing. I think it's designed to kill 40-year-olds who are still trying to prove that they got it. I just want you to know I learned that thing strictly for you all tonight, and I hurt myself a lot doing it this summer. I would practice at Ryan, and one time I was there with the DeLorean, and wiped out like the worst wipeout I had ever on that thing. Blood like running down my hands and knees and shoulder. And just then a guy comes up and wants to look at the car. And he's completely oblivious to the fact that I'm hemorrhaging out right in front of him. He's like, whoa, what is that made of? I was like, picking pebbles out of my hands. Stainless steel and like blood pouring down. But was it worth it for those 2 laps? Was that weird for you? Did you enjoy that? I hope you did. I almost didn't make it tonight. The team had to pull me out of a tent that I'd set up in the parking lot of Costco because I wanted to be first in line. And they had to talk a little bit of sense into me, but it's okay. I'm going to go back after the show. I've got Governor Walker holding my spot for me because he doesn't have a place to live anymore. Is that too soon? I've got a lot of, ooh. I love Governor Walker. He's the only governor I ever met. And I was starting to befriend him and like weasel my way into a night in the executive mansion, and all that happened. So yeah, I feel really, really bad about that because I lost out big time. But I just heard Sears is closing, so it's like one guy happy about it, and 4 people who shop there apparently aren't here tonight. What's that? Yeah. They're like, it wasn't closed already? I thought it was closed months ago. Who wants it to become the center again? Yeah. Hashtag bring back the center. I never even laid eyes on the center, but I have dreams sometimes about the center because it had like everything in it, but I don't, yeah. Don't stop talking about the center, okay? Just talk about it during intermission. We don't have time for you to tell everyone what the center was. How was your summer? Everyone have a good summer? Yeah? Too fast. Mine was weird. Did any of you catch the article about my neighbor in the ADN or the News Miner? Yeah. I have this vision of you all flipping through and reading that and getting to the point where I'm in there and you're like, wait a minute. The story guy found him? Like, the story guy? Yes, the story guy found him. Sounds like that's news to some people up front here, but yes. And I am actually going to tell that story tonight. I'm going to tell it before intermission because it is not necessarily for sensitive listeners. So if you are not excited about that story, we'll just say if you're a sensitive listener, you're welcome to head out to intermission early. Don't feel bad. I'm used to people walking out of the room when I start talking. So. Let's see. How many of you have never been to one of our shows before? By round of applause. You can raise your hands, but it's just blackness. I don't know if I should be excited or sad about none of you have been here before. Okay, well, let me explain a couple of things super quickly. One, on the back of your program, there are a couple forms you can fill out. The first is a memory form. We do that every show, and the idea is we want to hear about your memories on a certain subject matter. And for this show, we want to hear your bizarre Alaska weather memories. So fill that out, turn that in to anyone of the ushers between Storytellers, or you can turn it in at intermission. and then I will be reading them. They'll be coming up to me, and I'll read them on stage during the show. So that's the first thing you should know. Second thing is on the bottom of the back of the program, there's a form, and there's a number of things you can do with that form. You can just tell us if you want to get added to our newsletter, or if you want to volunteer, or if you have a story, or if you know someone with a story. You can also enter your name to tell a story tonight. We're going to have one audience member telling a story after intermission. So fill that out, get that into a usher between storytellers or at the information table during intermission, and one of you will be a storyteller for us tonight. Make sure, though, that if you don't want to be a storyteller tonight, that you circle the right thing. Otherwise, that will be a shocking moment for you when you call your name. There are some rules for being our storyteller tonight. First of all, it has to be a true story. It has to be from Alaska, because that's where all the best stories are from. And ideally, it's your story, but we're flexible if it's a story you've heard from someone else, especially if they're not with us anymore. During intermission, there's going to be an information table. That's where, again, you can drop off your memories and forms. We've got bumper stickers again for $5, if anyone would like a bumper sticker. We conducted a study, actually. This is why we decided to produce more. We found that people who had Dark Winter Nights bumper stickers on their car, the value of their car jumped 50%. It was amazing. There was only one small caveat to that, and that was that you had to sell the car to me. So that's the only problem. But there is another perk to that besides the resale value. If we see your car with the Dark Winter Nights bumper sticker on it, we will put a free ticket to the next show under the windshield. As I'm saying that, I'm thinking how many of the executive producers are accidentally going to be giving each other free tickets to the show because we don't know what each other's cars look like. But if it's a DeLorean, I think they'll probably know not to put the ticket there, but who knows. Okay, we also have some signed Dark Winter Nights posters from previous shows. None of you have been to a previous show, so we'll just skip that part. Okay, we have 7 amazing true stories from Alaska tonight, so let's get to it. I'm going to shut up and introduce our first storyteller. He is from the hinterlands of South Central Alaska and wandered into Fairbanks to tell us about his time spent living downriver on the Yukon. Here's Scott Watterman with a story we call Saving Face.
I checked. There was no wind. I walked outside in the village of Huslia on October 23rd, 1988. The temperature was 2 degrees below zero. I'd had a good night's sleep. The night before, I had done the first ever radio broadcast in Huslia. I was the general manager at KIYU Radio in Galena, and I had gone over to Huslia to do our public radio fundraiser. I'm sure you're all familiar with those. And I had a great night. I had Stephen and Catherine Atla come in and talk, and I had a little area in the community hall set up, and I had my microphone set up, and I had a telephone line back to the radio station, and I had people coming up, and they were sitting right under this safety poster that said, "If your clothes ever catch fire, stop, drop, and roll." That's important for later. So I went outside this morning and I walked around, crisp fall day, really nice day. And I stayed out for a few minutes, blue sky, not a cloud in sight. My nose hairs started to freeze together. I knew it was slightly below zero. Went back inside to Wilson and Eleanor Sam's house, and they served me a great moose stew breakfast with Carol and Roger Huntington. We talked for a good while, and Roger was going to take me over to Malosey Hot Springs, and we were going to stop and meet someone who I had talked to frequently on the air, but never met. So we went down to the Cub, and we pulled the wing covers off, got the Red Dragon out, heated the engine a little bit. Roger did his pre-flight. We loaded all our gear in behind the rear seat. I climbed into the back seat. He gets in, fires it up. We take off across Big Lake from Huslia on the ice, and we clear the trees on the far side, and we're only a couple of minutes out, and all of a sudden Roger goes into this steep bank turn. I hear him say something, "Bear." What was that? "Bear." lift up my ear flap. What was that? Bear. I can't hear a thing over the noise of the engine and everything else. We're in a steep bank turn. He's pointing down, and I'm looking out, trying to figure out where this bear is, and I don't see anything. And we're in this steep bank turn going around. I'm looking down. All of a sudden, the airplane shakes a little bit. I'm not quite sure what's going on. I'm looking for the bear. And when I look up, I see trees in the windshield. I didn't think that was how this was supposed to go. We hit the trees. He had been trying to climb in a real steep climb, had the airplane belly up, and that did a lot of good because it kind of levered us into the trees, and the trees levered us down to the ground. When we hit the ground, he turned around and looked at me. He said, "You okay?" And I'd smacked my face on the bar of the seat in front of me and lost my glasses, and all the gear behind me had come over my shoulders and was kind of all around my legs. But I said, "Yeah, I'm fine. No problem." He says, "I've made better landings." I said, "Yeah." And all of a sudden, the plane just goes whoop and burst into flames. I still got my seatbelt on. There's a tree, and a Super Cub door opens to the top and to the bottom on the right side of the airplane. And I reached over and I pulled the handle and I tried to open it, but there was a tree right across the outside of the door, and we couldn't open the door. I began to panic a little bit. There was an emergency locator transmitter located right over my head. I'd worked on airplanes for a few years before that, and I tried to get it off, but it wouldn't come off, so I just smacked it as hard as I could, hoping that it would send out a signal. Then I realized if we couldn't get out the door, the window is my only other way out, so I took my elbow and I smashed the window out on the left side, and I reached out and I grabbed the strut, and I pulled, and my seatbelt was still holding me in the seat. So I holding onto the strut, I'm trying to pull the seatbelt with my other hand. You know those flight attendants when they tell you, the seatbelt in these aircraft may not be like the ones in your car? This is true. And I finally realized that I had to let go of the strut with my left hand and pull it that way to get out of the seat. Once I was clear of the seatbelt, I dragged myself out with the strut and sort of fell on the ground, rolled off. And I was sure, because this is always what happens in the movies, the airplane's going to explode, right? So I run, but then that safety poster kicks in. Your clothes are on fire, and my arm is blazing, and I stop, drop, and roll. Well, I kind of compromised because I didn't want to stop, drop, and roll too close to the airplane. And I rolled away once I could clear the wing. And I kept rolling and rolling and rolling as far as I could. And realizing my arm had been extinguished, which was a good thing, I got up and I called for Roger. Now, I'd lost my glasses, so I'm not seeing very well. I'm nearly blind without them. And I called Roger. No answer. I can hear the airplane crackling. I can smell the resins and all this other stuff just burning. Roger. No answer. He's still. I took a deep breath. And I ran back in under the wing. I didn't want to breathe any of that stuff. And I ran back in under the wing, and I looked into the cockpit, and he wasn't there. And my arm caught fire again. And I repeated my process, and I ran back out, and I dropped, and I rolled. And this time I had a really sharp pain in my back, and I found a little patch of snow. And I was just lying on my back, kind of wiggling into the snow to extinguish it. Got that done. Got up, called Roger again, didn't see him. I went around the front of the airplane. He's standing on the other side doing the exact same thing I was. He had thought I was still in the plane, tried to go in underneath, couldn't get there. His clothes are all on fire. In fact, he had a nylon jacket, and I advise you, if you're flying in bush aircraft in rural Alaska, do not wear nylon, ever. Just don't. So his nylon had begun to melt onto him, and he just grabbed everything and pulled it off over his head. And so he's standing there with just his pants and his boots on, and he's naked from the waist up, and it's 2 degrees below zero. I look at him, and he comes and he gives me the biggest bear hug. We never did see the bear, but I got a bear hug out of the deal. He gives me a big bear hug, and he goes, "Oh, I'm so glad to see you. I don't know how, I didn't know how you were going to get out." And I said, "How did you get out?" He says, "I think I went through the V-bars. He's bigger than I am." I don't know how he got out. He doesn't to this day know how he got out, but he thinks he went through the windscreen. Anyway, so we stand there and we look, and I had what was left of my jacket. The arm was burned. There was a big hole in the back, but he didn't have anything. So I had a long sleeve shirt and a long sleeve T-shirt. I gave him the jacket, and he was able to put that on, at least zip up the front, have something over his shoulders. And we looked at the aircraft and realized that there wasn't anything that we were going to accomplish here. And I said, "How far from town are we?" He says, "Oh, not too far, just 5 or 6 miles maybe." Turned out it was 7. But so we started walking. And as we were walking along, we walked along the river a little ways. And he says, "We should probably sing a little bit." So we started singing Amazing Grace and a couple of other gospel songs that I didn't really know the words, and he knew some of the words, but not as many as he thought he did. And so we sang for a little while, and his throat was starting to get a little hoarse, and he said, "I'm getting cold. Maybe we should make a fire." Well, I had the only piece of survival gear that had survived the burn. We had everything was in the back, and it had all fallen around my feet and whatnot, and still in the aircraft, along with the $800 that we had raised in cash the night before. Rifles, radios, all that stuff was in the aircraft. So the only piece of survival gear we had left was my Zippo lighter, because I smoked at the time. I haven't smoked since they put me out. So the Zippo lighter got us a fire going, and we warmed up around that for a little bit and continued our walk back to Huslia. We did another fire a few minutes, maybe a half an hour later. Overall, it took us about just about 2.5 hours to walk back. Along the way, at one point, he said, it was a Sunday. He said, "We might think about maybe going into Fairbanks and getting somebody to look at us Monday or Tuesday." Well, we got back to Huslia, and he wasn't moving quite as well. In fact, his eyes had swelled shut, and he was holding on to my left arm and guiding me and telling me where to go. He had grown up in that area, and he said, "Well, when we come around the bottom of this lake, look for 2 big spruce trees and a big rock between them. There will be a little trail," that kind of direction. Got us back to the lake, and then when we got near the edge of the lake, he sent me on ahead. When I got back to the shore where Wilson and Eleanor's house was. There were 2 trails going up to it. I went up the left trail, and I opened the door. I knocked real quick, opened the door, and walked in. And Carol Huntington, who had worked with me for about 8 or 9 months at KIYU, she just looked and said, "Who are you? Can I help you?" She didn't recognize me because my hair had all burned off, my beard was gone, and my face apparently had been burned a little bit. So I said, "Roger's hurt, he's out just across the lake." Wilson, Eleanor, and Carol all ran out, fired up a snow machine and a 4-wheeler, went running across the lake. I have this weird memory for phone numbers, and I had called a bunch of people to set this community event up the night before, and I called Rose Ambrose, who was the physician's assistant in Huslia. She came over with Marty Beifelt and a couple of other people, and while I was waiting for her, I had called Gary Guy at Friendship Air Service, and he said there was a flight inbound, but he couldn't raise them on radio because they were below the level. So if somebody went out to the airport and stopped him, they'd give us a flight into Fairbanks. Rose sent, I think it was her nephew or somebody out. He grabbed a 3-wheeler and actually stopped the plane from taking off as it was starting its takeoff roll. The pilot thought, here's a crazy kid on a 3-wheeler, but when he found out what was going on, they turned the plane around, got us out to the airport. Now, I should say that my time in Galena had been interesting, but it wasn't the job that I'd really wanted. I had just the week before been trying to think of how I could get out before my contract was up. And I'd been on the phone with a friend of mine in Wasilla, and I said, I signed this contract, I'm committed, but I'd love to find some way to get out, without losing face. So I get on the plane with Roger and Carol and Rose Ambrose, and they fly us into Fairbanks. Now, when we got to the airport out here, we had to come right over here to the hospital right behind us, and they had 2 ambulances waiting for us. And as we start down Airport Way, we get part of the way down, and all of a sudden both ambulances pull over to the side. It turns out that Roger's throat began to swell and shut, and he needed an emergency tracheotomy. And the only person on either of the 2 crews that was qualified to do it was the guy that was taking care of me. So they had to change attendants, and he had to do an emergency tracheotomy out on Airport Way somewhere. When we finally got to the hospital, we didn't think we were hurt that bad. I was 4 days in intensive care, 25 days in the hospital with 3rd-degree burns over 11% of my body, including all of my face was gone. Roger had 3rd-degree burns over 50% of his body and had 26 skin graft operations. He was 180 days at Fairbanks Memorial here. Today, he's flying his mall. He's got a Bible camp up on the near Ruby, and is still doing really well. I did get out of Galena but I didn't get out without losing face. Thank you.
Scott Watterman. All right, here's some of your memories. Freezing rain and ice in November, walking to work with ice grippers over my extra tufts. Weather was always wet in Yakutak. However, one day I went in the front door as the sun was very bright. However, out the back door it was raining. It's the first time I saw the dividing line to weather. And it was my first time in Alaska coming from Kentucky, my first winter here. The temperature dropped to 54 below. One morning I walked out and there was a huge moose outside. Needless to say, I missed PT that morning, but my first sergeant grilled me for missing it. We deployed the next year and had to spend a month in Kuwait to get accustomed to the heat. We went from 54 below to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Our next storyteller is a 3rd-generation Alaskan. His grandfather was born on Fort Wainwright before it was Fort Wainwright. And he's got a story of how you can nearly die in Alaska less than a mile from civilization. Here is Josh Buzby with a story we call A Fearful Thing. Just get this the right height for you.
That's not bad. All right, something you should know about me is I was born in Fairbanks, lived in Salcha, grew up in Salcha. Don't hold it against me or for me. And I grew up really close to just south of Harding Lake. And growing up there, of course, you're anybody who's within like 5 miles is your next door neighbor, right? And we had the neighbors growing up, Art and Ann Ward and their kids. They were my mom and dad's age. And we grew up with them, and they were awesome people, and they were fun to be around. And except for when I started turning into a punk kid about age 13, you guys can relate. That happens. There was one time I remember it was midsummer, and I was about 13 years old, and Ann called up and said, "Hey, I need you to come down here and pick up your sister because she's done doing some stuff, and my sister was, I don't know, 9 or 10 or something, and needed to come back to the house." And I was the only one there because I had important stuff to do, like holding down a couch. I was really into that, and I thought this was an imposition on me to actually have to go do it. And I let her know that and had some words for her about, "You're not my mom, you can't tell me what to do." And being a sweet lady, that kind of offended her. And I think she hung up crying, and little did I know that wasn't going to be a good sign for me, because I hung up the phone thinking I had won, right? Yeah. I'm going to go back doing my important stuff, which is holding down this couch. I didn't really feel super good about it, but I knew I had won. 20 minutes later, in walks Art, Anne's husband. And in the Bible, there's a passage that says it's a fearful thing to fall into the hand of the living God. It is a fearful thing to fall into the hand of Art Ward when you've disrespected Ann Ward. And I did. And he was a svelte man. He grabbed me. I was only maybe 2 inches shorter than I am now, and probably 20 pounds lighter. And he picked me up out of the chair, put a hole in my shirt, and shook me. And by the end of that, I was not winning anymore. I was going down to pick up my little sister. So I did. Still not feeling super good about it because, punk doesn't wear off real quick. And fast forward about a year later, I and my brother, Conan, that's his real name, he's sitting right there, I can still see him. We were staying with my dad because my mom and dad had split apart, but my mom lived just about 3 miles down the road from where my dad was. And I figured, I don't know if he agreed, but I roped him into it anyway, that making a trail that went from my house to my mom's, from my dad's house to my mom's house would be a great idea. Because you could go due west, cut through a sea of black spruce, hit the Old Valdez Trail, hang a left, and then 6 miles later you could be to my mom's house. Great, that makes sense. 6 miles, 3 miles. It works out. It's good math. So we decided to do it. We get all ready. We got the little, every young man's dream is an Elan, a little cylinder banger engine. We're gonna get on the snowmobile and we're gonna cut across there. We get our stuff on. I think it was in December or something. We've gone back and forth about the actual date, but I'm telling the story, so you have to believe it. And so we get going, and it's like maybe quarter, half a mile. We get on the snowmobile and we're driving, and it's way too thick. You can't go through that stuff with a snow machine or anything. But we did have, we were prepared because we had a compass, right? We had this, those ones where they got like the little slidey thing and you can adjust the declination and you can shoot and where you're going. That's the one we didn't have. We had this great compass. It looked like a cross between an ashtray and a book, and it was huge in brass, and luckily you could spin the top off of it so it wasn't an anchor. But we had that, and the little dial is maybe about the size of a quarter. And it's, it's better than nothing, I guess. So about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we start heading off. We get a little ways down there, and then we decide, okay, we've got to abandon the snow machine. We'll start walking. Figure it's about 2 miles. We're hardy Alaskans. We can do this. So we start walking off. I'm checking the little compass, and I'm breaking trail. Snow's about knee deep or so. It wasn't too bad. Pretty warm out. We're going along. And then, it's not as light out anymore. It's starting to get a little dark out there. And we keep walking, and, after a while, it's dark enough that little compass, might as well check that thing because it ain't doing me any good. And black spruce forest that it is covered in snow, and you can't see the sky. And this idea that I'm gonna navigate by the stars, well, that ain't working out for me either. But no other really good idea came to me either. So we just kept walking, and kept going, and then after a while, I'm thinking we must be making time. We must be making some good progress. We're getting close, right? And then we come around like a clump of trees, and hey, there's a trail. It's right there. Somebody's been here before. We must be close to it now. This is great. Cool. So, yeah, but it's going the wrong direction. Okay, well, we'll go this way and we'll get back on track. And so keep going. And then, hey, there's a trail here. Wait a second. Okay, that's kind of suspicious now. Maybe we'll try this other direction. I started feeling like Winnie the Pooh when Rabbit and Piglet are trying to lose Tigger in the 100-acre wood, and they keep coming back to the same sand pit over and over again. It's like, this is starting to dawn on me that this is what's happening. What doesn't dawn on me is like, hey, we could just go back. That'd be all right, right? So we're going around. About the third time this happens, I'm deciding I'm getting kind of cold. I don't think I'm thinking real super straight and super good because, yeah, uh, I'm getting demoralized, and little did I know about that time, it was probably the weather that night. It started at 20 degrees, and by the end of this whole adventure, it's like minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit. A cold front or something had moved in, and the temperature just absolutely plummeted. I didn't really feel it. I've kind of felt at times like getting a little bit cold, but I wasn't cold then. I was getting tired, but I wasn't really cold. And later in my education, I learned that that's about your first really good sign that you're going hypothermic. Of course, you don't think about that because you're not thinking right. So come back on the trail. This time, I'm definitely with the fact that this is the same trail. I've crossed my path about 3 times now. I'm super beat emotionally, and I've been breaking trail now so this is probably 8, 9 o'clock at night, maybe even 10 by this point. So we've been traveling out in the snow for 6 hours. And I've been breaking trail that entire way. I'm done. I just decided, you know what? That's a good tree looking over there. I'm just going to climb underneath that and just take a little break. And so I did. I went, climbed underneath this tree, curled up. Like I said, I didn't feel cold. It's kind of like that, when you skip lunch and you're to about the point where, if you've eaten breakfast, you don't have lunch at noon, about 2 o'clock, the hunger pangs go away. And you say, your body's just telling you like, well, you're an idiot. You're not going to eat, so why be hungry? Same with this. You're cold. You're an idiot. We'll just tell you you're warm. It'll work out. So I was feeling good. And just not feeling good, but not clear, not really contemplating anything. Like I said, I didn't think, going back to the house was a good idea. It didn't even really occur to me that was even possible. I thought we were too far along to actually make a turnaround and go back. I didn't think of making a fire. Didn't think about really anything. All I could really think about was I had this crazy AC/DC headbanger rock and roll song going over and over and over in my head, and I still can't remember all the words to it. And so I crawl up under the tree, and I think I fell asleep. And my brother Conan, well, he decided this is not a good plan. And talking about him later, he said he got a burst of energy about this point in time, and he realizing that this is the same trail, said, well, I'm going to head back to the house, or I'm going to head somewhere. And he said he could hear dogs barking in the background. So he thought it was like one of our neighbors growing up, so he started running, and Conan can run. And so he started running to it, and then they'd go back, and then he'd hear him again, and he'd start running. Well, it turns out those are the cars on the highway going by. So we had not made it that far. And and then he runs into the snow machine. He's like, hey, cool. And 13, and it fires right up for him. And at 20 below, a snowmobile just starting up for you is like kind of unheard of. And he gets on it, starts zipping back to the house. About this time too, or a little bit before this, my dad has decided something's gone wrong, right? They're not back here. They're not at their mom's house. They got to be somewhere in between. Deductive reasoning. So he starts calling and looking for help. So who does he call? He calls Art Ward. And he and Art come, and they're coming down the trail. They know they can follow where we've been, and they meet Conan on the snowmobile halfway. Conan walks the rest of the way back. They take the snow machine and come looking for me. And they get from Conan that, he's that way under a tree. Pretty good directions, right? What can go wrong? And I remember about that time, they're coming up, and I hear something yelling, but I'm not responding to anything at all. I can hear something, and then Art gets to me first, and he reaches down and grabs me and picks me up. And he's yelling at me. He's like, Josh. And I'm like a, waking up from a dream in which I'm in a tunnel that's a train track, and there's like a little point of light way out the back, and I kind of like, what? And I remember just being annoyed. I was like, dude, I'm asleep. I'm good. Just leave me alone. And, well, he didn't, so. So he hauls me back over to where my dad is on the snow machine. They put me on the snow machine and then take me back to the house. Salt to Rescue has been called at this time, and they're there waiting for us at the house, and they're ascertaining, he's hypothermic. They take your temperature, and when you're cold and like that, and you're not putting a thermometer in your teeth, it's going somewhere else. I didn't care. But I was at least 2 degrees below what your normal body temperature likes to hover at. I eventually get warmed up, right? And things go back to normal, right? Except I had at that point I had frostbite from my knees down to where the top of my boots were at, which was really cool, man. It like frozen skin is pretty neat. It all cracks and peels, and it's you. But other than that, it's normal, except for now, I'm a 14-year-old kid that knows that you can die, right? Before then, it never crossed my mind. I never thought, hey, it never occurred to me that out there I might die. And that kind of changed my viewpoint on things for a little bit. Didn't take effect real soon. I'm still a young punk kid at this time, right? Don't get me wrong. But the main reason that I kind of wanted to deliver this story at this point in time, though, is because earlier this summer, June 24th, Art and Ann Ward, Art was a bush pilot and flew around, and he had a cabin in McCarthy, and he and Ann were on their way out there. And still don't know exactly what happened, but the short of the matter is that they crashed in the flats southeast of Delta and died. And so I just, I think about them. I think about when we used to, growing up with them, and all the good times, that we've had with them. And being in with Art and Ann, you always knew that you were welcome, you were well taken care of, you were in good hands when you were with those people. And now they're in the greatest hands of all. So, thank you.
Josh Buzby. All right, a couple more of your memories. Last October, instead of snow, we had freezing rain that laid down a layer of ice thick enough to go ice skating on our gravel driveway. First time for everything. And I guess in Fairbanks, in the last 20 years, we haven't been getting big snow. Approximately 3 years ago, Fairbanks got like 10 feet of snow in a day, knocked power out for 3 to 5 days for various parts of town. I was house sitting somewhere with a wood stove, and it was a lot of work to keep the place warm enough to not freeze around 10 to 12-hour work shifts. And that's not even to mention all of the shoveling. I love when Fairbanksians complain about snow. Yeah. Hate snow. I forgot to mention that our audience storytellers tonight are going to get a super cool gift bag full of Dark Winter Nights and KUAC swag. Do you say swag or schwag? That clarified nothing. There's going to be a lot of arguments on the drive home tonight, I think. Our next storyteller drove the Haul Road for 8 years. Her mentors and teachers included some of the original drivers who built the road before the pipeline even existed. One of the favorite pastimes of Haul Road drivers is telling stories. Tonight she's going to share a few of her favorites. Here's Charity Timm.
Let the bass kick.
Yeah, you like that?
No problem.
Yeah, no problem.
Oh, great to be here. My stories tonight are dedicated to the sister of my heart. Her name is Joy Wiebe. She died in a crash a couple months ago up on the Haul Road. One of the best up there, and I was privileged enough to learn from her, be her shopmate, be her friend, and she just inspired me to be the best driver I could be and the best person I could be. And inspired all of us that knew her to truly, truly find joy in the journey. So the Hall Road is it's the supply line. It's the supply line between Fairbanks and Dead Horse, basically, and then Dead Horse supplies all the North Slope for the oil production. And the drivers that run this road have basically built their own culture over the years. First of all, do not call them truckers. It took me 6 years, my first 6 years driving the road, and after 6 years, they finally bestowed upon me the title of driver. And if you've been up there long enough, you earn the full title of professional haul road driver. So thank you very much. That's what it is. Don't call them truckers. Every mile on this road between Fairbanks and Prudhoe, they have we refer to it as by place names. It's not milepost. They all have names. Every mile has a story, and I was privileged enough to learn from drivers that knew these stories. Every mile of the road, and every driver has their personal nemesis, their corner, their bridge, their hill that is just that section of road is out to get them, and constantly over the years they have trouble with that one section. My personal was Connection Rock, but that comes later. Most drivers have a lot of drivers have a problem with Adigan Pass. It's 130 miles north of the Arctic Circle. It's the pass over the Brooks Range, which is it's the very end of the continental divide of the whole North American continent. So you go over the Brooks Range, and this section of road is Adigan Pass, and it has its own weather system. It has its own system. So early days of the road, and this is someone else's story. I learned this from a driver that drove back then. The road wasn't much more of a goat trail then. Martin and Croucher are heading south, and Croucher's behind, and they had both been meeting drivers that said, "Yeah, Adigan's bad tonight. You're going to need chains. Throw chains. It's slick. You're going to need some help." So they get close to the pass, and Croucher calls up to Martin. He says, "Hey, Martin, what are you going to do? You're going to stop and throw iron?" And Martin comes back with, "Oh, I'm already running for it. I'm going to go check it out, and I'll let you know. I'll let you know what it's like." Okay, so he gets up around the first corner, he gets past the pipe crossing, and he hits a slick patch. He spins out, and he slides backwards as soon as he's spinning out. So the only two choices you have at this point is to stuff your trailer into the mountainside of the snowbank, or you slide backwards and you get going so fast that your trailer takes you over the other side of the road, and you're going to be going down for a long, long ways. So he tries, he does the right thing, he gets his trailer in, and his trailer slides, and it keeps sliding, and then his trailer is now pointing up the mountain, which snatches his truck around, and all of a sudden he's gripping on his steering wheel, and he's looking back down the hill. He says, "Oh, no, okay, this is what you want to do," and he slaps it into a high gear and starts driving. He gets around the corner, and he meets a set of headlights. Well, Croucher was supposed to wait at the bottom for him, and he didn't. And they're both as surprised as the other to see themselves meeting a truck, and Croucher gets on the radio and says, "Martin, what are you doing?" Well, the golden rule is when something bad happens in your truck, you can freak out. You can go back in the sleeper, you can make a sandwich, you can climb out of the passenger window, you can climb over the truck, climb back in the driver window, you can scream and shout, take off your steering wheel, whatever you want. But when you pick up the radio mic, you better be calm, cool, and collected. That is the golden rule. So there's a long silence. A long silence. And then Martin comes back with, "Well, I went and checked up the hill for you, but it's a little slick. I think I'm going to go back to the bottom and throw some chains." One of my all-time favorites. Adigan, it parks us. It shuts the road down more than anything else. Avalanches, trucks on the top running out of fuel. My personal longest record over Adigan, and it's only 2.5 miles. It's from bottom to top to the bottom of the other side, 2.5 miles. 4.5 hours one night. Okay. So here we go. The last weeks before this, and this is about year 3. I'm on the road for about 2 or 3 years, so I've got a little bit of experience. And the 2 or 3 weeks before this, we had been seeing this grizzly bear that had killed a caribou. It's November, December. Killed a caribou, and he's sitting on this caribou carcass for, he's wandering around. Then they come back. You know how grizzlies do. And this one particular night, it is clear, beautiful, full moon, bright moon, 11:30 at night, except we can't see the moon because the wind is blowing so hard. It's raising this dust cloud of wind about 50 feet in the air. And I've seen this before because you can look on it from on top, and you can see stars and everything up ahead, and you look down, and it's white because of the snow. The wind kicks up the snow. So we're driving underneath the snow, and you can see the moonlight coming. I have pictures of this night. You can see the moonlight coming out, and it's this eerie glow of brightness. So we stop, and we drive by the grizzly, and we say hi. He's there, okay. And we stop, and we all put our chains on. There's 5 of us. And we head up the pass, and the 4 of them are up ahead. And I get across the bridge, and I get up, and I don't even make the first switch back. And my truck stops. I mean, the engine's running, but it just will not go. And I thought, what's going on? What you got to realize is when you're in a blow, when the wind is blowing that hard, you've got to put your Arctic gear on. Because you're going to be, it doesn't matter what the temperature is, the wind's blowing that snow, and the driving needles at you, it's going to frostbite you faster than anything. So you got to put all your Arctic gear on, which makes you walk like a penguin, and you're trying to get under your tires and grab stuff, and you got your mirror. Anyway, it takes a long time to do anything in the wind. So I get out of my truck, and I check, and my one set of chains are on, and the other set is gone. I don't have the best chains on this truck. So it is, they're disintegrated, they're gone. So I grab my emergency chains, and in the back of my mind, I'm like, this grizzly's 300 yards back down the road, and I keep looking back down to the end of the trailer. So I get these chains on as fast as I can. 45 minutes later, I'm back in my truck, and I make it around the switchback. All right, guys, I'm coming. Because they're all waiting on me, and we'll all stick together. So I get going, and about 200 yards later, my truck stops again. These chains are ground. There's no traction to them. There's no anything that's going to dig into anything. And there's drifts. There's just this soft powdery snow, and you need some good chains on it. I was like, okay. So I get out my emergency chains, which are in worse condition than the best chains that I put on. So I don't know how this is going to help me any better, but I'm going to try. So I put those on. 45 minutes later, I get back in the truck, and okay, I'm coming. I get back up, and I get about to the waterfall, and I'm stopped again. I'm like, what do I do now? Well, I had one more set of emergency chains, and they're my regular chains that you throw on these duals on the drivers. They're tri-rails. And I have single rails for my steer tires and for my trailer. And again, they're worn out, and they're tired. They're tired chains, and I get those out, and I double them up. I throw them on top of the chains I already have on. I'm like, this is all I've got. I don't know what to do. And I get back in my truck. I take all my Arctic gear off. I'm like, I'm done. I'm not getting back out of my truck again. If this doesn't work, I'm spending the night on the pass, just parked right here, and they can come get me in the morning. So I get back in, and I put my truck in gear. I push the brake in, and I let off the throttle and let off the clutch and ease into it. My truck starts rolling up the hill. I get my foot off the throttle. I take my hands off the steering wheel, and the 4 trucks ahead of me make these tracks up the hill through the snow drifts. And your steer tires are going to kind of find it. And my truck walked itself all the way up to the top of Attica. I drove it down the other side, and that's when I took the picture at 3:30 in the morning of us taking our chains off. And that was a good night. It was a good night of just the camaraderie and working together to get through things. The other thing that's unique about the whole road is the lingo, the vocabulary. We have a language of our own to speak to each other. Drivers is one of them, but how we refer to the road conditions and what's happening and talking back and forth to each other is a little unique. I experienced this probably year 4 or 5. I'd been up there a while. I was coming south. I had an empty flatbed, and I passed one of my fellow drivers, my same company as me. He's heading south with a lowboy. He's got a big piece of equipment on his trailer, which requires a pilot car to be in front of him. So I go up ahead of him and I say, oh, hell, the next hill as you're going south after the Arctic Circle, the next hill is Beaver Slide, which is the longest hill on the road. It's not a really steep one, but it's a long straight shot. It's absolutely straight shot, bottom to top. It's over a mile. It's the longest hill on the road. So it kind of gives you problems every once in a while. And I said, well, I'm empty. I'm just gonna bright sunshiny afternoon. I'm gonna go check out the hill for you and let you know if you need to, give you a road report. I get about halfway up, and I'm like, pick up the mic. I'm like, hey, yeah, Ronnie, I'm wiping just a little bit, but it's not bad. I keep driving and get about 3/4 of the way up, and I get on the radio again. I was like, yeah, Ronnie, I'm starting to wipe pretty good here. It's getting iffy. And I get to the top, and it's just marginal. I mean, like, my tires are slipping. I'm feathering the throttle. I'm gonna get over the top of this hill. I'm not gonna spin out. I don't want to put chains on. I told them I was gonna do it. I gotta prove to the senior driver I can do it. So I'm doing my best driving. I get to the top, and I make it. And I get on the radio, and I say, Ronnie, I was wiping really hard at the top there. Yeah, you might want to put chains on. Well, his pilot car comes back on the radio and says, driver's already out of the truck. He's parked. He's putting chains on. I was like, okay, cool. You guys are good. See you later. He's going to be a while. I'll see you back in the yard, and I take off. Well, what I didn't know was that the pilot car had his girlfriend in the pickup with him. She had come along for a little ride along, and she wasn't used to the give and take back and forth on the radio. And she turns to the pilot car driver and she says, "What the heck is she wiping up there?" Yeah, you gotta be there. But the favorite part, my favorite part of my North Country and the haul road is everybody is on the same crew. Everyone's on the same team. No matter what company you're driving for, everybody's helping you. My very, very first winter up there, I didn't know anything about trucks. I mean, I had my CDL. I knew how to drive one. I had the license, and so they sent me up to throw freight, but really didn't know what I was doing. And I'm coming south, and like I mentioned, Connection Rock has bit me more than once. It just, for some reason, that's my bad one. And I'm heading south, and I hit up Connection, and I spin out. I'm stuck on the hill. So you put your chains on, and you walk up the hill, except I wasn't quite, this is like probably my 15th trip. I mean, like, I really didn't have that much experience, and I'm out trying to put chains on, and eventually, middle of the afternoon, it's busy. There's traffic, so there's like 5 or 6 trucks behind me, kind of parked. They can't go anywhere, and there's 12 trucks at the top of Connection. It goes up, and then there's like this bench. I mean, it's like a viewing balcony where you can just have a front row seat of anything that's messing up in front of you. And there's 12 trucks parked up there, and I recognize one of them, and he's like the top notch, like king road of king driver of the road, and I'm like, oh God. I mean, the pressure, I'm the rookie, I'm the new guy. I really need to get this done, and it was just too much for me, and I was taking a while, and I just kept messing up, and I couldn't do it. My sister Joy was one of the northbounders up top waiting, and she got out of her truck, and she got her chains off her hangers. And it's a 1/4 mile hike down the hill, and she's smaller than me, and she's hauling these chains probably way more than she does. And she hikes down the road, and she shows me how to do it right, and she gets the chains on for me, and she gets in my truck, and I give her a ride back up to her truck, and we clear the road, and everybody goes on their merry way. But it was just my introduction, and one of my favorite memories of the family and the true community that is up on the road, and how thankful I am for it. Well, thank you.
Let the bass kick.
Charity, Timm. All right. The first year I remember freezing rain in the middle of winter, I could have ice skated all the way from town to Esther. A bunch of cars were sliding sideways on the road before the hill to Gold Hill Valley, and nobody without chains could make it down. Has gotten weirder since then. It happens every winter now. Went to visit my boyfriend one spring, but we had a fight, and I stormed out, only to find my car was not on ice anymore, but now on mud. I gunned the engine because I was angry, but only mired the wheels. I had to walk home and come back at night after the ground had frozen again. The ice fog was so thick I ate it for lunch. You know, there's a lot of PM 2.5 in there. I'd lay off on ice fog for lunch. Just want to remind, I forgot to mention that Hutchinson High School, Future Farmers of America and Acadeka are going to be selling chili potatoes for intermission today, so it's going for a good cause. Our next storyteller is one of the handsomest men in Alaska, if not the world. Is this the right script? Did someone change? His rugged good looks are only matched by his striking intellect and sharp wit. I don't know who wrote this. Please welcome to the stage. Oh, it's me. Okay, that makes sense then. With a story I call Won't You Be My Neighbor. All right, so here's the story behind the story, right? 2010, we moved into our house, and on the day we moved in, a neighbor came up to welcome us to the neighborhood. And I just thought it would be funny to say, you know, hey, is there anybody in the neighborhood I should avoid? Which I thought was a joke because it's a fairly nice neighborhood. And he said, actually, that guy, and pointed to our neighbor. And I was like, what? Because I got like a 6-year-old kid, you know, and a wife and stuff. And that was not the answer I was expecting. He said, yeah, he used to be a really nice guy. And then something went wrong in his head a while ago, and now you don't want to have anything to do with him. And I thought, okay, wow, that's weird. So found out later, too, that the girls who grew up in the house, from the people we bought it from, they were not allowed to play outside if he was outside. Now, I gotta fill you in a little bit on the place where we live. We live up off Boulain Hill. We have almost 5 acres. It's all wooded. We can just barely, this guy's house is just about the only house we can barely see his roof from our house. So the fact that these girls weren't allowed to play outside when he was outside, I mean, you would not want to try and walk between our houses. It's rose hips, it's down trees, it's a mess. So I very clearly got the vibe this was not someone that I wanted to interact with. And so for, years, I basically would try to do anything that might be perceived as aggravating the situation. I wouldn't chainsaw near that side of the property. I wouldn't, if there's like something interesting, I wouldn't run out with binoculars. So you think I was the CIA or something like that. And we always we just lived in the shadow of this guy, wondering if at some point he's just going to lose it and we're going to be the nearest target, But in all that time, I never once, not once, saw him. He apparently would go and do grocery shopping late at night so he wouldn't have to interact with people. I never saw him shovel his driveway, never came across him ever. No idea what he looked like. Then last winter, for the first time, I noticed all winter long there were no tracks in his driveway. And I thought, he's dead. And I don't know what to do about it, because normally in this situation, well, you'd go over and say, everything okay? I couldn't do that, wasn't allowed to do that, specifically told not to do that. So the other option I thought was, well, I can call the troopers and do a wellness check. But in my mind, I could see that conversation happening and say, hey, can you guys do a wellness check on my neighbor? Sure, what's his name? I don't know. How old is he? I don't know. Does he have any friends in town? You ever leave the state? I don't know. So I could see that conversation not going well and being kind of embarrassing for me. So I felt like I did not have enough information to justify a wellness check. So I just kind of agonized all winter, wondering if he was in pain, what the situation was. Because where we live, you're not going to, and like a lot of you, you're not going to be comfortable very long without getting water delivered, without getting oil delivered, of course, not getting groceries, all those kind of things. So I just kind of spent the winter wondering what happened. Finally, in early summer, I'm driving by his driveway, and there's a sign goes up at the bottom of his driveway. It says, house is up for auction due to lack of paying borough taxes. And I'm like, oh, at least this is in the capable hands of the borough now. I wasn't sure if you were going to see the foreshadowing on that one. They must have known what happened. They've got this all cleared up. They got it under control. So all summer, we'd see people coming and going from the property, assumed they were borough people, you don't want to be like creepy and jump out and be like, what are you doing here? But what happened to them? So we kind of like wait to time it. We like see a car, we go back to the house, we'd quick come down the driveway and pretend we're going for a walk, and by then they would be gone. So it wasn't until about August, a couple weeks before the house is supposed to go up for auction, that we managed to catch somebody. So we, see somebody, we stop, and we just talk to them like just a guy walking down the driveway, and we say, what's going on? You know anything about what's going on with this place? And he said, I'm just here looking at it because I'm thinking about bidding on it for the auction and buying it for my wife and kid. We're like, huh. So the general public is just wandering around our neighbor's property now. That's interesting. And my mom happened to be in town, and my mom is a window peeker. Do y'all know what window peekers are? Very different from what are the bad ones? Peeping Toms, thank you. It's a very different group. I want to distinguish between the two. She's not in it for that sort of titillation. Her idea of a good time is to a house is for sale, maybe in the neighborhood, clearly nobody's been around, we're going to walk up and look in the windows and see how they lived or something, So we've done it a few times, it's always embarrassing, but so she's from Michigan and there's a lot of window peekers there. So you want to close your blinds if you live in Michigan. Especially at night, we do it from the car. Anyway, she's in town. And the next day is Sunday, and she says, let's go have a look. And my wife and I are like, yeah, let's go see how this guy's been living like a recluse. That's kind of interesting, and whatever. And my daughter, who's 14, we're like, you want to come? She's like, no, I want nothing to do with the recluse's house. And she was very smart, too. I'm very glad she decided not to come along. So we walk down our driveway, down the road, and we walk up his driveway, and the first thing you have is the garage. I don't know why they do this. I don't want to know right now. You can tell me later. But in our neighborhood, the garage is way down from the house. I assume if it's bad weather, they thought you could park there and walk up, but then it makes the garage useless. But at any rate, we come to the garage first. And the garage is, kind of unfinished. It's like a 2-story garage, and it's not terrible looking, but next, we walk up to it, and there's a door, and next to the door is a sign that the borough's posted that says, inspect at your own risk. And I look at that, and I think, they knew the general public was coming and looking around. Wouldn't they make it extremely clear if they didn't want you to go in, right? They'd say, do not enter, and they'd bar the door and all that sort of stuff. I'm like, inspect at your own risk kind of implies you can inspect, right? It's sort of like swim at your own risk, So we're like, okay, well, I guess we can go in. So try the door, open it, and I'm going in. And honestly, I was a little bit disappointed because it was not creepy at all. Open the door. He's got a really old, 70, I don't know, it's a silver Subaru wagon. I'd never seen that model before. And he's got a red pickup with some stuff piled on it. But to be completely honest, his garage was less creepy than mine. Other than the DeLorean, which kind of improves the mood of my garage. My garage is super creepy, and his guy's was way better. So kind of well, nothing too weird in here, close the door. And we continue to walk up to the house. And as we're walking up the house, the driveway is kind of gravel and grass, and there are trees growing about this high in the driveway. And I'm thinking, nobody has been up this driveway in a long time. You can't even see the house from the garage, so we make our way up to the house. And the house is kind of like a corner-shaped house, and the entrance to the house is kind of in that front corner. And the house it looks kind of like Alaska homeowner built, a little bit. Not terrible, but, there's a tiny little balcony off an upstairs door that doesn't have a railing. It's I think that's probably not up to code, but whatever. And there's another sign by the front door that says, inspect at your own risk. And by this point, this has become like the Alaska welcome mat to me. come on in. Inspect at your own risk. Anyone? There's pretzels on the table. So, so I'm like, all right, we're going in. Try the door. It opens. I'm like, all right, here we go, going into the inner sanctum. And the first thing that we see is this small landing. And then there's some stairs that go up to kind of a second floor kind of open area there, pretty small. And my wife and my mom decide they're going to go up the stairs first. And again, a bunch of rolls of toilet paper and clothes, but his stuff is still there. I decide I want to go around this door. There's another door that's going somewhere else, and I don't know where that goes. I want to find out. So I go around, I open this door, I'm all by myself, and there's a narrow, short hallway, and I see some shoes here, and I don't understand what this area is, but it is pitch black in there. Because he has covered up, there would be plenty of light normally, but he had covered up all of the windows with that thin foam board insulation. So it is black in here. And so I pull out my iPhone, click on the light, and I'm going in. And this is where the music would play if you were watching a movie of this type. I go through the little bit of the hallway there, and then it opens up, and it's probably 15 by 15. And the first thing I see is what looks like a queen-size bed. I'm looking at the footboard for it, and the sheets are like this thick on it, like comforter, like clearly he's having some cold nights there. And so big old thick sheets. And I'm looking at with all I can see is my little iPhone, and I kind of like one eye closed, you know, like I'm not in the mood to be surprised by anything. And I'm thinking, he's dead in the bed. What do you want to bet? And I'm just like kind of looking. It's sort of beyond the reach of my iPhone a little bit, and I'm like expecting him to see just like the top of a head or some, you know, hair. And I don't really see anything, and the bed is made. I'm like, probably unlikely he died in his sleep, and the bed stayed so nice. So I come around to the left side, there's some things in the back corner, and then right around here to my left is like a wooden desk, and he's got 7 or 8 cans of food next to it, stacked next to it. So I'm like, okay, this was like his home base. This is where he was operating from. But the place is it's not messy. He's not a hoarder. It smells like really bad basement smell, like kind of musty, moldy, kind of like really bad grandma basement smell. And then I look around to the right, and there are these 2 other rooms off of it, almost like little den, like a den or two. And I don't know why the room is laid out this way, but there's kind of a little cutout to access them. And I can kind of look into the one over here, and I see some boxes, nothing too interesting. But then I have to come around a little bit to see into this room that's opposite this wall. And I come around the corner, and I'm not entering the room, but I'm just looking into the room. And I see something that I cannot tell what I am looking at. I'm just dumbfounded. I'm looking at this thing, and the thing I thought it looked like a 5-foot-tall stuffed animal rabbit flopped over in a chair with its head between its knees and its hands hanging down on the floor, and it's just in a little wicker chair. And I'm looking at that, and a couple of things go through my mind. First of all, well, let me explain why I think it looks like a rabbit. It's got a like sweatshirt and sweatpants on, so someone's chosen to dress up this stuffed animal. But poking out of the edges of the sleeves are fuzz, like stuffed animal fuzz. That's like 1 inch long. This like gray, whitish fuzz like you'd have on a stuffed animal. And it goes all over the hand, and it's poking up around the neck. And I'm like, why would this dude who's like probably in his 70s have a like 5-foot-tall stuffed animal rabbit? And why would he flop it over in the chair when he's a pretty tidy guy? Has he used this thing often or something? And the other reason I thought it was a stuffed animal was because it was flopped over so far that it's farther than I could flop. I could never get my head that far down between my knees. It was like it had no spine and nothing inside here. I've since found out yoga instructors can do that, but I can't do that. And so I'm sitting there with my flashlight looking at that thing, and I just straight up cannot figure out what this is. And then I notice something else. I notice that the fuzz that just encompasses this whole hand continues onto the ground and goes between its feet and connects to the other side. I'm like, is it like disintegrating this thing and that fuzz is all over the place? And then I look at the head, and I notice that there are no big, nice stuffed animal fuzzy ears. There's long gray hairs. and patches of skin. And that's when I realized this is probably not a giant stuffed animal. I still honestly wasn't sure. And I remember distinctly taking a moment to think, what do I yell that's appropriate for my mother, because she is here and she's a good Christian woman, and I do not want to swear, but I do want to communicate very clearly that I think I found him and we need to get out of the house right now. So I did okay. I kind of took the Lord's name in vain, and I said, "Oh my God, he's in here. I found him." And bam, we are out on the porch so fast I don't even remember. They don't want to see him. They're not interested in that. They'll take my word for the description of it. And we're out there, and we're like, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? And my wife is like, well, we can't call the police. We're trespassing. And my mom, my sweet mom says, it's okay. I'll take the heat. She's like 74. She's going to go to FCC for us and like hang out with them. Be like, I made them go in. So I'm like, no. Here's the deal. We're doing a wellness check, okay, because we kind of were. I'm going to call the police, tell them we were doing a wellness check on our neighbor, and we found him. So I call 911 for I think the first time in Fairbanks, which is kind of good news. And I say, so we found my neighbor, and he's dead, and he's been dead a very long time. No rush. I wanted to communicate very clearly. You don't have to come like sirens blazing. I'm no coroner, but I'm pretty sure I can call this one. And so we walk back down the driveway, and the first people to show up are the EMTs, and they're the UAF EMTs, who are the students who are also EMTs. And we went down to meet him because he has no mailbox, he has no address sign, anything. We want to make sure they found the driveway. Plus, I remember hearing that in like elementary school. If you have a fire, you go to the driveway and meet them. I don't know. Anyway, we went down, and we walk up with the EMTs, and they say, can you show us the body? And I say, sure, because honestly, I knew this was going to be a seminal moment in my life. And I wanted to take in this space a little bit more because I knew it was going to change my life kind of forever, having experienced this. So I really didn't have a problem going in and looking again. Of course, they don't have flashlights, so we have to use my phone. Again, just add to it the creepiness. So we come around and show it to them, and they're like, yeah, he's dead, all right. But then I see something that I didn't see the first time. And between his legs, it looks like there's this pipe. And I'm looking at that pipe, and I'm thinking, what is this room that there's plumbing running like 8 inches across above the floor? I'm like, no one would do that. Even in Alaska, you wouldn't run plumbing just through your house like that. And I thought maybe he knocked over a lamp when he died. And I'm looking at it more closely, and I noticed that on the top of this pipe is a trigger. And it's a shotgun. And that's the moment where this wave comes over you, and suddenly the story comes together. And you're like, oh my goodness. Like, apparently he must have shot himself in the chest, because if he shot himself in the head, I don't think there would have been a head left. Some people have said you must have been really, traumatized by this. But honestly, the way he died, I saw very little of him. I really only just saw the back of his head. So other than that, it really could have been a bad experience, but I kind of lucked out in the way that he died and the way that I found him. We go back out on the porch. My mom is crying because she feels terrible. This is just supposed to be a fun little window peeking thing, and she just feels so guilty. She goes back to the house. She tells my daughter what happened. We answer some questions for the troopers, and then when they leave, they're pulling on sleeve protectors and gloves, and they're going back in, and I think they earned their pay for that particular day. The next day, I mentioned it on my radio program, thinking, now this is all going to come to light. I'm blowing this thing wide open, and nothing happens. And I think, okay, well, apparently this is not that big a deal. It's the first time I found a body like this, so I don't know if this is news or not. People would say, why didn't you call the news miner? And I was like, well, it feels kind of exploitative, like, guess what I found, I thought the word would get out somehow. And it did. After about a week, the ADN called me, or sent me a message. They said, hey, So I understand you live next to this guy, you know. They didn't know I was the one who found him, and I told them I was, and so they told me they wanted to do a story about him, about his life, not necessarily about this part, but about who he was before all of this. So they came up and we did an interview, and I just kind of, that was like a Tuesday, and kind of waited around, and I thought, well, this will probably be like section F, you know, page 5 or something at some point. Well, then the following Sunday, it was the Sunday of Labor Day, I think, my friend Sarah was down visiting in Anchorage, and she shoots me a picture of the cover of the ADN, above the fold, this guy's house. I'm like, holy cow, like I had no idea this was that big of a deal. And then a week later, same thing with the news miner. And it's pretty amazing, and it raises some interesting questions, such as, can you auction off a house with a dead man in it? And it is kind of hard to pay your taxes when you're dead, so does that change the whole, like, didn't pay his taxes thing? But, you know, I really appreciated the way they handled it. They had a lot of good information. First of all, his name was Paul Pasica, and he apparently was a pretty influential guy in Alaska politics in Juneau in the 80s, and then sometime in the 90s, things unfortunately started to go wrong in his head, and he would talk about like hearing Jesus, and friends tried to check in on him for a long time, and then eventually, you know, a few years ago, someone tried to check in on him and had such a bad experience with it that they just said, we can't do it anymore. And the ADN, while I think they did a really good job, they also found out that it was like, I want to say it was like 4 years since he had gotten a water delivery. I thought maybe a year or two. We were gone the year before, so I couldn't say if he had any tracks, but it could have been he was there 3 to 4 years at most. And he's basically like in a root cellar, you know, so he just probably froze and thawed for a number of years. The ADN took it as a kind of, you know, this is what happens when we don't check in on our neighbors kind of thing. But I think for me, that was like too simple of a way of looking at this. That's kind of what we want it to be. We want to be able to say this could have been prevented if we were all just more social. But I don't know how this could have been prevented. And the problem I think that maybe we just can't abide, that we can't handle, is that sometimes some people can't be saved. Well, hey, I can see you all. Welcome back. Holy cow, there's a lot of people out there. I would have been way more nervous telling that story if I knew not. All I can only see is like the first 5 rows. You know how much easier it is to walk out here? I don't think that thing is the future, I'm going to be honest. But so while you're settling back in, I'll let you know our next live event's going to be probably sometime in early March. We don't have that nailed down yet. It will be 7 p.m. here. And you can follow Dark Winter Nights on Facebook. You can sign up for our e-newsletter on our website. Don't worry about being bombarded by emails by that, because I'm too lazy to send them out, so you'll get like 1 a year. We also will mail you a postcard. We have some little address labels out in the information booth. If you'd like us to mail you a postcard reminder of the next event, we'll do that for you. We can do it for your friend, too, if you want to write their name down. Thanksgiving's coming up. I just want to quick mention, we're in this weird period between Sam's and Costco. I don't know what they'll call it. The Sam's Costco divide or something. But the Fairbanks Rescue Mission desperately needs meat. Particularly, last I heard, they need 150 turkeys or like meat equivalent of that. So hams, or they also will take game meat if you have moose or caribou. So I just want to make sure that you know that these social service providers are kind of struggling between these two businesses here. So Fairbanks needs to step up for that. So the Fairbanks Rescue Mission, last I heard, needed 150 turkeys, but just meat of some kind would be great. And then the Fairbanks Food Bank desperately needs pies. They thought they were going to get 1,000 pies, and that fell through. So if you have pies, you can make pies, but not custard-based pies, because apparently those are deadly. I don't know if you knew that. Other kinds of pies are fine, but there's something about custard-based pies that are homicidal, so we aren't going to make those. Okay, a couple of memories here. After the Chena Hot Springs bike race, my friend and I got caught in a wild hailstorm when a big black cloud let loose torrents of hail just as we managed to race to our car and get safely inside. It pounded the windshield for quite a while. It had been a sunny day, so this was totally unexpected. Back in the 90s, we had the coldest winter, the longest winter, and the most snow winter. A lot of people left town forever after that. A friend who recently moved up was told to buy cat litter to keep in the car for traction. She came home with cat treats. The justification, they were cheaper. I think you use the cat treats to attract wild cats. You harness them and they pull your car out, but you know how cats love doing that sort of stuff. So, okay, about to do our audience storyteller here. I hope you remember the rules because I'm not going to repeat them. All right, send in the robot vacuum. So for those of you who can't see, my vacuum is slowly making its way over here. It's black on black. I don't think so I feel like I need to do a verbal description. The two brushes are spinning madly while it's cleaning. Oh, it's coming here closer. So since this is your first show, generally I like to have the audience storyteller name come out in a weird way every time. And the only weird new toy that I had this year was a robot vacuum. It's the only toy I have that would move by itself. Is that as far as you're going to go? Okay, all right. So we'll pull out the dustbin here and see. Pat M. Donald or McDonald? Pat M. Donald. Does that sound familiar? Come on down. I guess I could have told you where to come down. Come down over here. Oh, yeah, come this way will work. I'm just not liable for the next 10 seconds of your life because that's a scary. Keep coming, it's good. Robin will catch you. And she made it, all right. Congratulations.
Wow, this was unexpected. I do have to say that usually my husband corrects all my stories, but tonight he's not going to because it's my memory, and so he doesn't get to. So it's true in my own mind, so we'll see. So we commercial fished for 10 years down in southeast Alaska, and we were power trollers. When I say we, I mean my husband and I and our 2 young children who are not all that much help. So our son was 2 when we bought the boat, and our daughter is 7 years older, so 9. So they were on the boat with us for many years, and we'd spend the entire summers out fishing and so on. And we had some great stories. And I think I could probably have a whole show of my own with stories of my daughter, because when she turned 13, it was not good. The 40-foot boat kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller. But the thing that happened that I'd like to tell you about is one night towards the end of the summer, we were down fishing off Cape Muzon, and there were some really beautiful anchorages out there. And some of them were, well, you could take the shore skiff at low tide and go see petroglyphs. And in general, the water was just gorgeous down there when it was good. So when it was bad, it was really, really bad. But part of the real fun, and this is the community seems to be a theme tonight, as does weather. So this story kind of intersects those two things. So there was some great anchorages. The night before, or 2 nights before, we had just anchored up by tying our rope around a pier so that you can go up and down with the tide. We learned that the hard way anyway. But so somebody else had wrapped around a really short pile, and when we woke up in the morning, we heard all kinds of hollering and yelling, and apparently their boat rose up above the top of the pier and drifted to shore with the tide. And it turns out that a lot of people don't wear any clothes when they're sleeping on their boats, because there were a bunch of naked people trying to push those boats off of the shore. The kids had to stay down in the forecastle. We didn't let them up. So this was kind of fresh in our mind. But about 2 days later, we were anchored up. And these are really long days. When you're fishing in Alaska, you're waiting for it to get dark, and that doesn't happen very much. So we had some really long days. And I was always on anchor watch because, well, once kids are born, you stay up and listen for things all night. And when you're on a boat, there's lots of things to listen to. So I was always on anchor watch. But this particular night, it was towards the end of the season, and we were in a harbor. There are two harbors next to each other, and one is Daku and the other is Datsku. Does anybody know these harbors off of Cape Musang? I can't tell. It's all dark out there. There's any. So anyway, it's a beautiful harbor, but it's not very big. And we knew the season was ending, and so we rafted up. And the way that works is you drop your anchor line if you're the first one there, and you have to, I don't understand this, but you have to leave a bunch of anchor out, and you have to leave a bunch of rope out. So your anchor line is maybe 6 times the depth. So it seemed like an awful lot of rope because you could like swing, right? Really a lot. I never understood that part. But anyway, what you can do is you can raft up. People can raft up and tie onto your own boat. So that's what we did. And I can only remember Lois and Dan. There was 2 boats onto us. So we were the one with the anchor down. And Lois and Dan, I think, were next to us, and there was another boat there. And we had a great time. We were all overtired, so we were probably laughing a lot and having a great time. The water was flat, calm. The kids were we even let the kids stay up, I think. So we had a great evening with we had our little hibachi out there. We always pretended we had it was a fishing boat, so we pretended we had like a sauna and stuff down in the bottom there, but there was nothing but ice and fish down there. But it was like when a yacht would go by, we'd be all, diapers hanging from the line and whatever. But so this night was gorgeous, and we rafted up with those guys, and everybody went to bed, and I was always on anchor watch. So I slept upstairs listening. And in the middle of the night, there was a storm like I have never seen. And this, my husband and I do agree on. We have never seen a storm like this. And it was a squall, and it came up just all of a sudden. And I just shot out of bed, and I looked, and it was daylight, right? But it was pitch black. It was probably hurricane force winds. And the boats were in this little tiny harbor, and they were swinging around, and there was a yacht right there. So I hollered, you gotta get out, there's a storm. My husband, are you sure? It's like, we agreed on that. There was a storm. There really was. So anyway, he came shooting up, and he did wear clothes because we had kids on board. So he came shooting up, and it's like all 3 of us were like, we got to go. And Paul's like, we got to unhook these lines. So everybody's trying to unhook, and our boat was just swinging. And that darn yacht was right over there, and those people were really sleeping soundly because they had a yacht. They were probably insured. So anyway, they were sitting there. And if you've ever been on a fishing boat, we had 2 poles that were like this. And what you do when you're anchored up is you pull this one up. You go fishing early in the morning. So if you can leave your poles out when you have your fishing lines going out, that makes it faster to get out and get your lines in the water. But when somebody anchors up to you, you have one pole up and the other one stays out. And it kind of counterbalances. Well, we're swinging around, and we're getting, the yacht is like right there. And we have to undo these other boats before we can pull anchor. And so we're untying all these boats, and these 2, and they're like, goodbye. They're like, I don't know where they went. It was the middle of a storm, and it was very dark. It wasn't dark, but the sky was dark. And we cast them off, and we started spinning as we pulled the anchor up, and the boat started spinning, and here's the yacht right there. We probably missed the window of that yacht by a foot. And all I could think of is, the kids are not going to college. We're going to be paying for that daggone yacht. Just swung right around and came like that far from the yacht. When those people over there, they finally got up and they were like, I've never seen eyes that big. They were like amazed. Well, that squall didn't last just long enough for our heartbeats to stop and then start again. And so we all took off. We even took off. Everybody took off. And it was not a great storm, but we went around and found a new anchorage because maybe no one would know us there probably. We dropped anchor again, and that may have been the last summer that the whole family was on the boat. I'm not sure. We may have fished another couple summers, but that was the last season that Lois and Dan fished. They were quite a bit older than us, and so we never actually saw them again. That was the last time we saw them when we were saying, "Get away, get away!" And they were really great friends, but I'm sure they've got a different version of this story. But they did not see those people in the yacht. I'm telling you, that was really impressive. I've never seen eyes that big. So commercial fishing is always an adventure, but if you really want to have a lot of adventure, you have to bring the kids on board. And you'll have a lot more stories. Some are not about fishing at all. So that's the end of my story. I hope you enjoyed it.
Pat Donald. All right, more memories. It was December of '98, and we had an unusually warm spell. The temperatures were in the 50s, and myself and a friend decided we might not get another chance to sleep out under the stars without a tent in the dead of winter, so we grabbed sleeping bags and laid out on the bed of the Delta River. 2 hours in, after being pelted in the face with silt for the whole time, we realized the wind always blows on the Delta River, even on dark winter nights. I appreciate you working that in. The light columns made from the intense ice fog made it look like these giant 9-foot wide spotlights from cars and streetlights. Isn't that amazing? What's that called? There's a name for it? Oh, apparently there isn't a name for it. Okay. First winter in Alaska, 1999, lived in Healy, went down to the lower 48 and left my car in Death Star parking lot. Is that a real place? You have a Death Star parking lot? I thought they blew up the Death Star, but okay. It had rained over the holidays and got to 40 below, so my car was frozen to the parking lot. Oh, that's great. Our next storyteller is a captain of sea and sky. He's a licensed master mariner and airline transport pilot. He lives on his parents' original homestead with 2 horses, 2 dogs, and a wife. Please welcome Skip Libscomb with a story we call The Hat Came Back. Get up good and close to it, all right? There you go.
Hi. I went to this school 50 years ago, and we had our the 1968 graduation 50-year anniversary this year. I mention that because you can't live that long in this state on the edge of the Arctic without coming away with a extreme adventure story. And that's what I'm going to tell you tonight. It started with a note on the taped to my plane at Phillips Field, now part of the Johansson Expressway. It said, "Will you fly for us? We're opening a gold mine and we need a pilot." They pulled out big nuggets at the coffee store, and I thought, wow. I got the fever right there. I imagined to be having a big poke at the end, but at the end I got two vials, one for the plane and one for myself. The guys who were miners there, they got the same. The management said, "We didn't get any gold." you need to have that kind of in writing before you go to do it. The mine in 1991, it was just 80 miles south of here, in the foothills of the Alaska Range, between two big foothills, was the #1 producer in the interior in 1991. There was lots of gold there. When I voiced my displeasure at this cleanup dinner, settle-up dinner, they said, well, you want to go back and find your own? Go ahead. So I did. And I went with a friend who is a history of gold mining in his family, Del Johnson, and my wife, which was, we weren't married then, but we got married. The three of us, every hour we managed to shovel into this box, got an ounce of nugget gold. An ounce an hour is pretty good. It was $216 an ounce in 1978, which is when this was. And that was significant money. A nugget, by the way, is anything that you can hold over the pan. You drop it and it goes tink. If it doesn't make a sound, it's dust. This was all nugget gold. We had just a mile up from the camp where the airport was our little tent we had for a shelter, and we had a Briggs and Stratton pump in the creek, this Gold King Creek, pumping water through a box 5 feet long with AstroTurf in the bottom. When we were done for the day at cleanup, we would pull out the riffles, which were just 1-inch pieces of wood, and roll up this lawn and put it in a galvanized tub and shake out what was left in the bottom of the box. We'd pan that out, and there would be a big gold smile in the bottom of that pan. It was just ridiculous. This story, though, is about a hat, kind of. My family had a farm in Missouri, and I was on this farm managing it. We had longhorn cattle and buffalo, and I thought that qualified me for a Western hat. At a feed store, there was a huge pile of Stetsons, these boxes of Stetson hats, and on top of the box was 7, and that's my size, and I put it on, and I'm looking in this mirror, and I'm thinking, wow, I don't look too bad. And from the back of the store, the salesman says, you ain't big enough to wear that hat, son. Well, I whipped out $100, bought it, and wore it home. But then I parked it because I looked ridiculous in this hat. It was a big John Wayne commemorative Texas Cavalry World War. But at the mine, I felt like I could get away with wearing it. And I had a Randall knife, a big 7-inch Randall #1 knife. It's worth more than a 44 Magnum's Model 29. But you have to wait 2 years if you want one made for you. All the miners wore 44 Magnums, Rugers. And they asked me why I didn't have a gun. And I told them that I was going to Daniel Boone my bear. The bears in this part of the country are called Ursus, octos, horribilis. For good reason. But in my history, I had a teddy bear. My mom read Winnie the Pooh to us kids. I watched Yogi and Boo Boo. I fought fires for Smokey. I just didn't have a bad feeling about bears. Growing up on a homestead, my dad had the first pick of Chino Ridge property, and he picked the top of the hill. And I still live there. There's bears just over the hill. Lots of bears. But no worries. I volunteered to walk back from camp to get a jar of jam out of my plane that I knew was there because I had a jar of jam and a box of pilot bread for my survival box. And as I'm walking down the trail, it's in September. I've already flown all the miners out, and just us there, just three people. I'm walking down the trail, a mile to camp, and the leaves are on the ground, and it's slightly kind of misting. The ground was really kind of wet, and it's kind of slick. But I had tied on my dad's. I sold them out of his closet. Converse All-Star Chuck Taylors. Real popular with kids now. Which is kind of ridiculous because they're just like putting your foot in a plank. But I liked them because they were size 11s. I wear a 10, but I could put my boot socks on, but I didn't have to take my boot socks off to tie them on. So I'm walking down in these big shoes, kind of like a clown, and I detect a little movement over here across the creek to my left. I look over there, and it's a grizz. It's a beautiful shade of brown. It's leaning up. It's a male. I can tell that. It's leaning up against the bank across the creek, about a little further away than this gentleman here. It doesn't see me. Its eyes are closed. It's humming. It's playing with itself. What's more interesting than sex? I could have made my escape right then, but instead, I'm staring at this thing. All of a sudden, its eyes snap open. It goes from blissed out to pissed off, just like that. It does this amazing athletic feat of jumping up onto the bank behind it. I can't even imagine how I saw it, but I can't. It's hard to comprehend. And all of a sudden, it looks like a Minuteman missile coming out of the silo. This big brown furry thing is heading straight for me, arcing over the creek. I know that you're supposed to stand your ground. I tell this story to kids at school, and I tell them, stand your ground. Because if you run, you're prey. You don't run from a bad dog, you don't run from a bear, especially one that can do 40 in like 2 seconds. But tell that to my legs. Usain Bolt that had nothing on me. They say that the best bilge pump is a scared man with a bucket. The fastest runner has got the Converses on. It's got the bear behind him. I don't know what happened, but I ran right past my plane. I couldn't slow down. So I made a big turn. I came back to my plane. In my plane was a 12 gauge. I loaded it with bear slug, bear slug, bear slug. And I went stalking back up the trail for that bear. I was a little bit upset. Forgot about the jam. I didn't see the bear. I'm glad I didn't see the bear. I have never wanted to shoot a bear. I don't hunt moose or anything. I don't like to kill stuff. But I was ready then. And in the trail was my hat. I had to run right off from underneath my hat. I didn't think about my hat. I didn't think about my knife. I was going to Daniel Boone my bear? Ha! Never entered my mind. But my hat, my beautiful hat, I got to tell you about this hat. Did I tell you about the hat already? Did I bought it in Missouri on this? Oh, yeah, I told you what the guy said about it. Okay, thanks. Well, that hat was disgusting. The bear had stopped. I saw where it had slid to a halt. The hat saved me, but what happened to the hat was, I tell kids that the bear did a Mexican hat dance on it. But I really don't know what the bear did to it besides clawing it and chewing it. He kind of slimed it. It was disgusting. I didn't pick it up. I boosted it into the creek and it floated off. Back at the camp, I said, "Hey, we are out of here." I was spooked. In fact, I'm feeling it right now. I think it's called PTSD. Where was I? Oh. The next year, and I made a better deal with these guys. There was a different group in there. That other group, they didn't get the lease renewed. But there was other guys, the other miners there. And they were just as happy carrying their guns with them everywhere they went. But I got cash for every flight. And I got friendly. I liked hanging out with miners. When I landed one time, they did a special thing. They rang the bell and everybody came. And they had a little presentation for me. There was a bottle of blackjack, which if the FAA is in here, I waited 8 hours till I got back in the plane. But they walked around. They walked around the side of the building with this. One of the miners had found my hat. It was lodged into a willow downstream, and it had gone through the winter. It was clean, you could touch it then. The cook kind of steamed it, and they kind of blocked it back into shape. And when I want to feel ridiculous, that salesman, when I bought his hat, he might have been right. I'm not big enough to wear this hat.
Skip Libscomb. In mid-September 1992, I flew from Lake Minchumina to Fairbanks. I didn't know that Christopher McCandless had been found in the bus just to the south a few weeks earlier. As we neared Fairbanks, the ground grew whiter and whiter. It was snow, surprise, and it never melted until spring. There you go. It turns out bubbles are more fun when it's 0 degrees. They freeze in midair. That might not have been 100% what we were going for. That's kind of like a statement of fact, but maybe it's a memory for you too. The year I moved here from Flagstaff, Arizona, I arrived May 19th to 1.5 feet of snow still on the ground. It had snowed the week prior. Then just after Labor Day, September 8th, another foot of snow fell, ending summer while the leaves were still on the trees. Power was out for a week in some places. A thought, what have I done? The year was 1992. All right, our final storyteller tonight has always been fascinated by the Arctic and has spent much of his time working for the Alaska Department of Fish and Game out of Utqiagvik. Here's Geoff Carrol with a story we call Polar Whack.
All right, well, there I was standing on the sea ice of the Arctic Ocean. I was barefoot, I was standing there in my long underwear. There was a polar bear charging directly at me, and the gun I had that was for bear protection wouldn't fire. So anyway, I'll give you a little background, explain how I got into that predicament. I was the camp leader for the ice-based census of bowhead whales through the late 70s and through the 1980s, even into the 90s a little bit. But anyway, the idea of the census was was to count the whales each year and see if the population was increasing, decreasing, and ultimately basically to see if the population was large enough to support a subsistence hunt. Subsistence bowhead whaling is vitally important to many northern Alaskan communities, and the whalers themselves have kind of a reverence for bowhead whales, and they're vitally interested in maintaining a healthy bowhead whale population. So the North Slope Borough Department of Wildlife Management conducts a kind of world-class whale research program, and the census is part of that. During the times we've been doing the census, the population has increased from the low thousands when it started to currently there's about 18,000 bowhead whales in the world, so they're doing very well. We would do our counts from it's called the landfast ice along the Arctic coast. Landfast ice is attached to the shore and extends out into the ocean for anywhere from a mile to several miles. And beyond that is it's called the polar pack ice. It's unattached, free floating, and it moves back and forth with the winds and the currents. In between the two bodies of ice are leads of open water, and that's what the whales migrate up up through. And so we would locate our camps on the edge of that ice. We'd find these tall piles of ice called pressure ridges. We'd put our observation perches there. We'd keep a 24-hour watch, and whenever possible, and count all the whales that went by. Let's see. So we had a crew of people. That was kind of made up of a combination of local people and biologists kind of from around the world. It was sort of for us, it was the ultimate field project. We'd get to camp out on the sea ice for several weeks every spring, and the ice itself would give us a tremendous show. Sea ice is very dynamic. It's always in motion. Things are different. Every day we'd get to watch the tremendous force of the pack ice coming in and smashing against the shore fast ice with tremendous bangs and roars and groans and squeaks and whistles, and sometimes it would rip off a chunk of the shore fast ice, and we had to stay pretty mobile to make sure we didn't float off into the ocean or get smashed by the pack ice. Fortunately for us, we were camped in the vicinity of the Eskimo whalers, who are, they're masters of the sea ice, and they would give us advice, and we could follow their example. In addition, we had great wildlife viewing. We had literally thousands of bowhead and beluga whales swim past every year. We would see whales breaching up out of the water. We'd see mating activity. We'd see bowhead whales come up and break through the ice when the leads would freeze over. In addition to that, we'd see, literally millions of eider ducks fly by. We would see we'd see ring seals and bearded seals. Later years, we used hydrophones. We put an array of hydrophones in as well to listen to whales go by, and it turned out that the bowheads and the bearded seals were kind of fantastic singers. I mean, there's just always kind of a contrast. Everything's quiet on the surface. Put a hydrophone in, and it sounds like a jungle down there. So that was very. A couple other interesting facts about bowhead whales is they can live to be up to 200 years old. And they also, after sampling many hundreds of animals, are nearly free of parasites and other disease, and we've never seen any sign of cancer. So, interesting animal. But the really, being on the ice, the really exciting animals that we dealt with, or the most exciting, I guess, were the polar bears. And we'd get this. We were camped right on the edge of the open lead, which is where the seals were. So the bears would. So lots of polar bears around. We'd get to see these feats of strength. We saw a whale jerk a seal out of a hole, shake it around like a burlap sack, and we'd see them spread their legs way out and slither across thin ice, spread their body weight out so they could get across. See them swim in. They're really good swimmers and divers. They would swim in a long way on the open leads. But there was always kind of that element of danger and just sharing the ice with a big, strong predator like that. We were always on guard. If you were up doing your whale watch, you'd have at least one of the watchers every once in a while kind of looking back across the ice to see if there are any polar bears sneaking up on us, and sometimes there were. And the people in the camps always kept a sharp eye out, see what, and come and go from the tent, look around and see just what, make sure there weren't bears around. We had a variety of ways of dealing with bears. We used cracker shells, we used beanbag shells, we used air horns, we fired a few shots off with a shotgun. We used snow machines to chase them away. And 99% of the time of the bears we dealt with, had a happy ending. It worked out quite well. We had the way we would have our camp set up is we would have 2 sleep tents and a cook tent. That was always shoreward of the observation perch for the observers that to rest up and get a meal before they went on watch. Spring of 1985, there were a lot of bears around. We made sure we had a shotgun with slugs in each of the tents, and so one fine day, or one day in mid-May, one of the observers, a guy named Jim Schwarber, was in the cook tent, and he was going to go on watch. He was cooking himself up a meal, and he was kind of hunched over the Coleman stove there, and thought he heard something. So he looks over at the door of the tent, and here comes a polar bear in through the door, kind of halfway in, and so unfortunately, the gun for that tent was somebody set it by the door. So that didn't do Jim any good. And so he started yelling at the bear at the top of his voice, and didn't get the response he wanted. And so he reached down and grabbed the frying pan and threw it at the bear, and made a heck of a shot. Smacked that bear right in the nose, and bear backpedaled back out of the tent. A pretty good survival story right there. And I was sound asleep in one of the sleep tents, nice warm sleeping bag, and I thought I heard Jim yelling something about a bear. So I leaped out of the bag, grabbed a shotgun, ran out the door. I didn't even take time to slip on my bunny boots, and so I got points for rapid deployment on that. So anyway, I'm coming out the door of the sleep tent. The bears just backpedaled out of the cook tent and kind of spotted each other. The bear had just been bonked in the nose of the frying pan. He was pissed off at the world. So he decided he'd take it out on me, and made this full board charge right at me. So standing there with a shotgun in my hands, and we always kept the guns with 3 shells in the magazine, no shells in the chamber, and the safety on. That was standard procedure. So I'm kind of cranking the shell in fast as I could, same time taking the safety off, and the other thing that's going on is it's really cold, and guns don't always work real well in the cold. But anyway, I raised it up, pulled the trigger, and nothing happened. Quick as a wink. There was no mental, no thought process here whatsoever, but somehow I switched gears and decided to use the shotgun for a club. And so anyway, then I'm in position, and I kind of stepped into the bear. Adrenaline was flowing freely. I gave it my best swing and smacked him in the ear. And the stock broke off the gun, but it knocked the bear down, much to my amazement. The bear just went right over on his side. So okay, so and that was kind of one of those moments when time stood still. There's that bear, and I'm looking at him, he's looking at me. We both have surprised looks on our faces, and it was, he eventually kind of, okay, he wasn't, all right, here we go. He wasn't the biggest bear on the ice, but he was what you'd call a young male. And bears are kind of like humans. It's the young males that seem to get in the most trouble. And so anyway, he's there, kind of shook his head and got back up, man. He was ready for round 2. And so I standing there with a gun with no stock and wondering what in the world I was going to do next. And fortunately, my best friend Dave Ramey had come out of the other sleep tent, and he had a shotgun in his hands, and he raised it up and used the gun the way you're supposed to use a gun. He shot the bear. And so bear wasn't quite done. He spun around and ran off camp, and Dave shot it again. And we also called Dave Ugruk. So Ugruk was, he's got this great reputation for kind of a calm, cool mind and always doing things right. And he certainly came through that day. I don't know if we were best friends before the incident, but I've always considered him my best friend ever since. So we felt, we were sorry we had to kill the bear. I mean, we really tried to avoid that whenever possible. But it seemed a little bit unavoidable at the time, and it made us feel a lot better when one of the crew members, one of our local crew members, processed the bear and distributed it to the community, and a lot of people ended up with a good pot of bear soup. So anyway, so for an incident that, it was, you just wham, bam, and it was done. I mean, it was over in seconds. It's kind of funny to tell us everybody else has these good, long, involved stories. My story is really over in about, maybe 10 seconds at most. But anyway, for something that didn't last very long, it's had really a kind of a major impact on my life. The first off, I knocked the bear down so he didn't, kill me or maul me or something, and that's a good thing. Then I had my kind of my moment of fame. For some reason that got out into the press. It was on the radio and newspaper and stuff, so I got my 15 minutes of fame out of the deal. And then a couple of weeks after the incident, some people showed up in town. They had mushed dogs all the way from Duluth, Minnesota to Utqiagvik. And they were kind of doing a warm-up run for a trip to the North Pole. And they got to town, heard the story about the bear, and they wanted to talk to the guy that knocked the bear down. So they tracked me down, and we had a good conversation. Long story short, I ended up signing on with those guys, the next year, and the Steger North Pole expedition of 1986. It was kind of trip of a lifetime, and I just wouldn't have been part of it if we hadn't made that initial contact over the bear incident. But more important, at the end of that census season, I was attending a party, and this very attractive young lady approached me. And so anyway, it turned out to be Marie Adams, who was like the most amazing woman I ever met. She grew up at a remote Eskimo village, but in her 20s, she was executive director of the Alaska Eskimo Whaling Commission and could go off to Washington, D.C. and face down the federal government, or go off to London and face down the International Whaling Commission, and was able to, she and a lot of other people working hard were able to maintain the subsistence, the right for people to subsistence whale hunt in the north. And, then the next day she could come home and shoot a caribou and cut it up and fillet a fish, or, cut up a seal. I mean, she could just do it all. Anyway, I still had to dog sled to the North Pole and improve my whale counting techniques, but we did get married, and we've had 30 years of a very, very interesting life. So anyway, to wrap things up here, I think my little story has 3 lessons, at least for me. And number 1, if you're using guns for bear protection, man, get really familiar with that gun, whether it's a shotgun, rifle, or pistol. Man, practice, and know that firearm inside and out. Also, make sure whatever gun you're using is functional, and make sure that it's accessible. I think a lot of us walk around with a pistol in our backpack and have this crazy feeling of false security. Okay, number 2. If you do get yourself in a tight spot, don't give up. Keep fighting. Use whatever you have at your disposal. Jim used a frying pan. I used a gun like a baseball bat, and Dave used the gun the way you're supposed to use the gun. So, okay. And number 3, if you do something kind of foolish sometimes, and you get lots of positive attention for it, just go with it. Go with the flow, and maybe even milk it a little bit. You might get an interesting trip or a really good wife out of the deal. So, thank you.
Geoff Carrol. Thank you so much for coming tonight. If you want to stay tuned with more Dark Winter Nights events, you can get the e-newsletter from our website. Follow us on Facebook to stay tuned. That's the best way to keep up with what we do. Tag your photos with hashtag Dark Winter Nights if you don't mind tonight. And you can subscribe to our podcast, which is available where you get podcasts. And tell your friends, because our goal is to share the real Alaska with the world. And the podcast is a way that we do that. Some folks we want to thank here before we let you go. We want to thank the Herring Auditorium staff, especially Mary Conlin. She's the one who unlocked all the bathroom doors. Sorry about that. I guess we have to pay extra for the bathrooms when we rent the place. I'd like to thank Sarah Smith and Gabriella from Frank's Menswear. I think it was Sarah Smith's birthday this week, so I want to wish her a happy birthday. The photograph for our poster and program was by Sasha Leos. Tim Palmer did that amazing and not at all over-the-top intro for me at the beginning. Papa John's donated our pizza. Lori Neufeld and KUAC air Dark Winter Nights Radio and our TV shows. We appreciate that. Geek City was one of our biggest sponsors. They were our biggest sponsor. We're so sorry to hear that they're closing. The Tap House is our unofficial hosting for our weekly meetings. We want to thank our bartender, Matt, for taking care of us. Thanks to Cold Steel, who came to perform music as you came in today. Hutchinson High School, Future Farmers of America, and Acadeka for intermission food, iHeartMedia. My colleagues there, thanks for your support getting the word out. Amanda Huff for taking care of postcards for us. Goldstream Sports donated water bottles for our storytellers because a little piece of executive producer Katie Ott dies every time we use a disposable plastic water bottle. All right. I want to thank everyone who submitted stories. We're sorry we can't take every story, but we live off those story submissions. Keep those coming in. John Huff and Alaska Universal Productions for doing our lighting, sound, projection, and haze. Apparently that's not called fog, it's called haze. They are the magic makers. All of our volunteers, my daughter and my friends, many of whom didn't make it into the program, my students who are technically here helping for extra credit, but they really faked interest in the program too. Event photography by Sarah Manriquez, and the real force behind Dark Winter Nights, the only reason it continues, are executive producers. Amanda, where does she work now? Huff. Ryan, do we have a meeting tonight? Peterson. Robin, I'll bring the snacks. Robin, she has no last name. Chris, toilet paper arsonist, Zwolinski. Alyssa, I have a prior commitment. Enriquez, Brittany, Ubers on me, Carnes, and Katie, reduce, reuse, recycle, Otter Socks. I especially like to thank UAF Communication and Journalism Department, my employer, for supporting this idea from the very start back in 2014. Brian O'Donohue approved and funded our very first show. And then finally, one last round of applause for our storytellers, Scott Watterman, Josh Buzby, Charity Timm, Pat Donald. Come on up, Pat. Skip Libscomb, Geoff Carrol. I'm Rob Prince. Remember, these are the stories we tell up here in Alaska on Dark Winter Nights. Have a good night.